to be spending this panel session looking at innovation predominantly. And actually, circular economy presents a number of different ways that businesses are able to innovate and different business models to support that process. So one of the most exciting outcomes for businesses embracing circular economy practices is the different ways that they can come together and solve some of these problems that we're facing as we lie ahead with environmental pressures. We have unexpected collaborations, to remarkable new ways to use resources, to pioneering business models. The business community is absolutely leading the way to finding these solutions and coupling that alongside tackling the climate crisis. So I think today's innovation session is going to be really exciting. Now, we've got 3 fantastic panelists again with us here, and it will be an open and flowing session. So I'd invite all the delegates to please feel free to post their questions at the outset and during the panel as we're going through, and I will bring your questions in as best I can. Please say your name and your company so that I can refer to you when I'm bringing your question in. So in the very first instance, I'd like to welcome our first panellist, and that is Craig Sterling, who's the Chief Executive of CuanTec Limited, which is based in Oban. And they are working with fisheries and natural food sources to maximise the value of all that's been harvested in order to reduce the impact that food waste and plastic pollution have in our world. And I've been a huge component and excited person about this business at the minute I heard about it. And I'm really excited about hearing a little bit more about that today. And I'm sure our delegates will be too. Craig's career is basically ranging from bringing valuable knowledge and skills to CuanTec, aligning perfectly with the ethos of using waste to eliminate waste naturally. He comes to Scotland from California, and he has held leadership positions with key businesses throughout his career in the life and material sciences sector, and his experience in founding businesses as well. So he's been around acquisition, global licensing, as well as leading several successful product launches in tech across global markets. Our next speaker is Professor Martin Tangney, OBE. He's an international award-winning innovator, and he has established his first biofuel centre in the UK and made global headlines for his patented process for producing biobutanol, a sustainable advanced biofuel and renewable chemical from the byproducts of the whisky industry. And he now is the founder of Celtic Renewables. As a recognised thought leader, he's featured in TV stations all over the world and in publications from National Geographic to Time magazine, focusing worldwide media attention onto innovation and sustainability in Scotland, which is a tremendous accolade in itself. And of course, Celtic Renewables were indeed the Glasgow Business Awards overall winner just a few years ago. So it's super to have you in the room with us today. And he was awarded an OBE in the 2018 New Year's Honours List. And finally, but by no means least, we have Julia Kirby-Smith. And Julia is the Director of Fridge of Plenty, which is an ethical grocery retailer in North London. She set the business up in the midst of the pandemic, and she's got the ambition to sell only UK-grown, seasonable and sustainable produce, all sourced as locally as possible. The business has got a triple lock written into the company constitution, so it requires decisions to balance profit with people and indeed planet. Fridge of Plenty marks a change in career, and Julia used to be working as a broadcast journalist both in London and Singapore, and she's also a trustee of the food waste campaign group Feedback. So very accomplished people in our panel today, and I'm delighted to welcome them all again. So first of all, I'd like you to all just give a little couple of minutes on each of your business and what exactly it is from your perspective the circular economy has been to you and how you're embracing the circular economy as a business. So I'm going to come to Craig first, please.
Thank you. Well, for CuanTec, as you mentioned, for us, it's really about taking the opportunity to utilize food waste and turn that into a solution, into a product. It has a two-pronged approach for us. Removing plastic from the environment is something that is near and dear to me. I've always been involved in a lot of environmental campaigns, and I've seen firsthand the impact that plastic has on the world. Having the additional opportunity to take an existing food waste stream or different aspects of that and utilize that to help solve that problem is pretty exciting. And that's truly the circular approach that we envision, and that is the ethos behind what CuanTec does. For us, when you look at the plastic problem alone, it's pretty staggering when you think about it, that if you look at the amount of plastic that's produced every year currently, if you look at the weight of every single person on this planet, and combine that in total, the current annual plastic production is over 130% of the weight of every person on this earth. So plastic is a real legitimate problem for us. Now, if we can help solve some of those problems, like us and other innovative companies, to remove the single-use plastics while also using waste stream, well, for us, that's a slam dunk, right? That is absolutely the definition of a circular economy. Currently we're looking at, and we've perfected the ability to extract chitin from shellfish, and we use that for our packaging. We're also looking at other sources such as insect and mushroom. And these are all opportunities for us to take food waste that's out there and eliminate the way that food waste is processed, which currently either goes to landfill or is incinerated, which adds to the carbon footprint, and the global problem for global warming. And then to utilize that to remove plastic, which is something that obviously, it's a no-brainer. When you look at how much plastic is in everything we do, I can't walk through a store anywhere where I don't see plastic on every single shelf, and or in most businesses. So for us, it is the core ethos behind our company to take and eliminate waste and also to eliminate pollution at the same time.
Fantastic. So that's a great way to set it up, and it's using science to design things differently as well. I think quite often people forget that scientists are indeed designers themselves. So there are many different iterations to the concept that is design. Julia, can I come to you next? Would you like to tell us a little bit about Fridge of Plenty and how the circular economy has become a really important part of your world?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think we are quite different from your two other speakers. I think we really are at the kind of humble end of
Oh, we've lost Julia. So whilst Julia is being brought back in, I'm going to come to Martin. Martin, Julia, you've just literally dropped out, so I didn't get any of that. Apart from you said you felt that you were coming from the humble end. That was all we got.
Yeah. Shall I pick it up there? I mean, I think we're really on the ground. We're sort of doing things at the humble end because we're doing things that I think people would do in their own home economies. Hopefully, people who are conscious of food waste. But for us, it involves things like using our wonky veg to make soup, which we do in house. It's using our old bread to make crackers. It's simple things like reusing a lot of the packaging. We get sent a lot of produce in wool-cool packaging, which is fantastic. Cooling system, which we can then just reuse again when we're sending out to customers. And then also products. So we sell a lot of products that involve a circular approach. So we work with Toast Ale, for example, who brew beer using surplus bread. And we have a supplier who makes hummus for us, who uses kind of wonky veg and surplus ingredients. And it's just, in a way, it's just good business. It makes sense. All of these are kind of pretty simple, straightforward ways to incorporate the circular thinking. But I think, what's also nice for us is because we concentrate on UK suppliers and as local as possible. So it's even as close as producers and suppliers who are like a mile from our shop. We have a very direct relationship with our supply chain. And so a couple of examples, we work with farmers where we're basically asking them to pick to order. So we have minimum waste there. But also we now work with two different chefs who have been making some food for us to sell in the shop. And we're talking to them about how we can actually give them some of our unwanted, unused items that they can kind of repurpose in special meals, so special salads or special dishes. And some of that we'll do in-house more as well. But it's having those really close relationships with your suppliers means that you can talk to them about how you build circularity into what we're doing.
Super. Thank you very much for that. Now, Martin, could you give us an overview about what Celtic Renewables does and how the circular economy is important to your business as well, please?
Good morning, and thank you for having us here today. very important that we discuss all these matters. And Celtic Renewables is a biotechnology company that's playing in the same sort of space as Craig and Julia have been talking about. We're just doing it from a slightly different angle. We've taken a biological process that was actually developed over 100 years ago here in the UK, and at its peak was the second biggest biological industry in the world, behind the drinks industry. It's the only thing that's ever been bigger than it. And it died out in the 60s because it couldn't compete with the petrochemical industry, which we all think has been with us forever and ever. It hasn't. It was really only after the Second World War, when the Saudi Arabian oil fields were developed, that the world became almost totally dependent on oil for pretty much all our daily needs, from energy to chemical compounds and derivatives of the chemical compounds. And it's been a very, very short time we found ourselves here. So I'm just optimistic that we can replicate that and do it in an even faster time to get back out of that. But so what we do is we've reinvented that original process for making high value chemicals, acetone, butanol, and ethanol. And as the industry died out because it couldn't compete with the petrochemical industry, that main problem was the cost of the raw materials. It used high value, high cost, high sugar crops, basically, was the starting point for this process. And what we looked to do is, could we reinvent it using exactly the same sort of approach that Craig and Julia are talking about, take something that's low value and convert it into high value. So with a number of years of R&D funded by Scottish Enterprise Proof of Concept Programme, we managed to patent a process whereby we could get basically the same industry to use totally different resources. And one of the big sources of biological raw material in Scotland is from the whisky industry, where really only 10% of what goes in the front door comes out as the value product at the end, which is the very fine Scottish whisky that the Irish taught you Scots how to make. And the rest of it has no value, needs to be disposed of elsewhere. So that's our starting point. And that's really as much a business innovation as it is a technology innovation. And that's where I see huge opportunity for lots and lots of other innovators around the country that I hope will be inspired by COP26, which I know you're going to talk about later on. And that's where we came from, is to take low value materials. And it's not restricted to the whisky industry. That's just our starting point because of the abundance of the material in the country, which allows us to add a whole new level of sustainability to one of the most important industries in the country. And it's about, we shouldn't go around demonizing even with the petrochemical industry. We should be looking to add synergy everywhere we can and do it in any way we can. And we as a biotechnology company are hoping to grow a brand new green, sustainable biotech sector that will support agriculture, other food industries, any other industry we can take a residue from and convert it from low value into high value, and hopefully provide an example for other better innovators than me to come along and find more ingenious ways of utilizing resources that are readily available to us and converting them into higher values that will just displace the need for making these from petrochemicals.
Great, right. Okay, that tees me right up to ask the very first question, which I will ask all of you, if I may. For the people in the room, what's the question that you would ask as a business to allow yourself to look at it through the lens that you've just described? So you basically articulated about the whisky industry, and 60%, I think it was 20% you said actually comes out as the end raw product. So there's 80% of the materials that are obviously up for grabs along the journey. So what would be the question that a business in any sector should ask themselves when they're starting to look at a circular economy journey to allow them to get maximum innovation? I'll go to Martin first.
Oh,
just because you teed it up.
I suppose it depends on what your starting point is. If you're genuinely starting from the point of view of carbon displacement, which has been kind of the main driver for many years now, it's all about low carbon. I think it's a more complicated discussion, and the innovation has to be deeper in thought than just simply saying, well, let's count our carbon emissions. But if you start from there, well, then simple premise is, what's made from petrochemicals that I can make differently? And how can I make it differently? And then find the raw material, find the process. You start almost from the end and work your way backwards. What can I displace? Because I think saying we will stop using chemicals, we will stop using products that we need, healthcare products. The petrochemical industry provides us with things we can't live without. So we need to, it's like saying, stop doing this. It's not a message anymore. Oh, well, don't use things and that'll solve the problem. It won't. We need to use things. So if you look at the things that we need, how can we make them differently? What are the technologies that will allow us to do that? If they're not there, come up with them. Someone's going to come up with an idea. And what are the sustainable raw materials that we can use to go into it. So it's almost a reverse psychology on the whole thing, reverse engineering the process. What is it we need? And can I find a way to make it differently from something sustainable? The alternative, of course, is you look at a starting point and you say, right, there's all this abundant raw material. How can we get rid of it more sustainably? That's the other way to look at it.
So that brings me beautifully over to Craig then. So can you tell us what specifically, how would you interpret that from where you're coming at in your own business? What can a business in the room learn for this in terms of circular economy? How can we do this differently and look differently at our world to innovate maximum?
Sure. And really, and thanks, Martin, for teeing that up too in our direction, because it really does kind of key into what we do. We look at this food waste problem. If you're a company that wants to come in and look at a circular economy as a way to move your company forward, I think you need to understand what that truly means and understand where you can play in that. You may not be able to do all of it. You're going to, as Martin said, you need to invent new technologies and new ways to do things, ways to process the waste. What are you going to do with that? What inventive steps are you going to create to come up with a product in the end that can be reused, and created from that, such as us using the food waste to go to a single-use plastic replacement. But there's also other byproducts from that. You need to understand the entire process. So being willing to be innovative is really important. Making sure you understand what the question is that you're trying to answer, and being willing to partner with the right people to help you. You may not solve all the problem with your approach, but your whole model will. But you need to have the right partners to help you do that. So it might be a company, for instance, with us, we have a byproduct that we use from our natural extraction process. And that byproduct can be utilized in other arenas. So the proteins that come out of the extraction can be used for feed, and with other applications, the minerals can be used. But is that our core business? No. And being willing to understand that you don't need to do everything. You just focus on what you do best, but then partner with others who do their areas best. So, partnering for us with insect breeders who are looking at utilizing and valorizing the full aspect of the bred insect for feed. That's a prime example of how we would partner to try to maximize the potential. Because you do need to be innovative. It's a big problem. It's a big question to answer. And you don't need to take on the whole, the whole circle to do it. Having the right team put together and the right collaborators really helps with that innovative approach. And I think that's really important. And to identify those who have and share that same mission is really important.
Thank you, Craig. Now, Julia, I'm going to come to you next, but what I'd like you to do is to tell us a little bit about how, from your perspective, because I do appreciate you are coming at it from a different perspective, how you've influenced your supply chain in terms of the circular economy journey. And to some extent, I know you've gone to say there's these elements of waste and we'll make a product from that. But how are you influencing those that you're working with to help them innovate as part of your journey?
I would say it's about conversations. It's about being really clear with our suppliers about what we expect. How we expect people to try and reduce plastic packaging, how we'd rather buy in bulk for certain items, that sort of thing. So it's sort of, you have that spending power as a retail business, and you can make decisions about who your suppliers are going to be. So even in those first initial conversations where you're scoping out who you want to work with, you can kind of send a message to people that you maybe choose not to work with by saying, I'm sorry, you're just not right for us because you can't meet the kind of ethos that we hold. I hope that answers that part of the question. I just wanted to go back to the previous point, actually, because I think the question around, for us in food, clearly, where is the waste is the big question. Where are the points where you get waste in the food chain? And so with suppliers, it is about things like picking to order, making sure that things get delivered safely. I mean, that's a kind of probably under-acknowledged part of food waste, is where, so many things now are being shipped and delivered with couriers, and the kind of damage to packaging is always a problem. But trying to get a grip on where the waste really is in your business is a big part of it. And that's what we've been trying to work on quite a lot. So we exist on a platform called Shopify that many of you will know. It's a huge e-commerce ecosystem. But what's really exciting about Shopify is there are now apps and plugins that are being developed that actually work in the food waste or in the kind of food inventory. So one of those apps called Freshly, and that has some really good analytics on looking at where you're losing inventory, where things that expire before they've been sold. And that kind of data is really, really useful, and it helps you get a sense of the entire process. So just speaking to the trying to understand the entire process, where the waste is, you can improve those. Maybe that you can't the entire process, but so much of it I think is about measurement and really to get a grip on the data.
Thank you for that. You were cutting out there, but I think we got most of that. Thank you for that. That's really helpful, particularly understanding data. And we did actually have quite a lot of content on data through the tech panel prior to. So that's a really helpful observation and how that translates to a very different type of business model. Martin, if I could come to you, I mean, Celtic Renewables seems to be very much a business with local solutions but global impacts. And I'm just really interested to hear a bit more about, do you think building a business model specifically with circular economy practices has helped you to gain that global reputation?
I think so. We kind of initially made our name on Mad Irish frisky residues and turns them into fuel when you drive your car. That's the quirky story, but that very quickly kind of dissipated, and people get the whole, this is a simple model to understand. This, if you can't tell that story, you can't tell any story. And I think the simplicity of it is what's captured the public imagination, and that's why we've had a disproportionately large international representation. Everybody wanted to come and visit. I also think we picked the name Celtic for a reason. Being an Irishman living in Scotland, my business partner is Scottish, and it was all about the Celtic heritage, because that carries all over the world. Whiskey is iconic; it carries all over the world. We've very unashamedly piggybacked on other people's reputations in order to grow ours. But that's something that everybody in Scotland should be proud of. For a nation of a few million people, everybody knows where Scotland is. Everybody knows where. Well, they might not be able to physically pinpoint it on a map, but they've all heard of us. That's for sure. And I think capturing that sort of global brand recognition is important, because you can convey simple ideas then. And it really is that simple. And every country has an equivalent of a Celtic Renewable sitting there. They're residues from other industries. As I said earlier on, it's really petrochemicals. It's one resource, oil, finite, that we found, we're digging up, we're burning it, and it's going to disappear. The world will never, ever again be total, unless the aliens land and give us some super new source of power, right? We're never, ever going to put ourselves in that position again, where we're totally dependent on one resource for the entire planet's needs. It's not going to happen. So I think local solutions are the way forward. And it'll be a mixture. There'll be no magic bullet here. And I think a circular economy model, in its essence, is applicable right across the world. It's just the raw materials and maybe the technology and the end products might be different, but we all have the same basic needs, and we all have raw materials we can utilize. So for me, yeah, it's a no-brainer.
Thank you for that. Now, in terms of trade, I'm going to ask a question of all of you, actually, to some extent. And international trade is very much part of the Chamber of Commerce's heartbeat. We were born in 1783 and very much the tobacco lords back in the days of the Industrial Revolution. So that's partly why we're really proud to be sitting at the heart of trying to drive change through all of this work, with the business community taking a leading role, which is tremendously exciting. But trade and trading stuff is very much part of our heartbeat, and something that obviously we would continue to support. However, what we would say is that we're starting to see, as businesses are starting to change, their ability to trade in a different way globally is going to change. So, to use the throwaway example of somebody with chairs in New York, and a lovely online business, somebody in Glasgow wants to buy their 100 chairs, instead of them being shipped over in a physical piece of transport, ship, plane, whatever, it comes in digital transfer file and it's printed locally in your local production depot. I mean, that's kind of transformational, changing the way that businesses and consumers indeed can trade and consume and buy in a better way. So have any of you started to see shifts in that, in terms of different ways of trading that is actually allowing still local trade to happen here, but actually businesses to exchange and trade out with your own local area? I'm going to come to Craig for that one first, and then I'll come to Julia.
Sure. That's a good question. I have definitely seen some changes, but a lot of it is still, in my mind, very traditional to the way business has been done. Because we utilize a physical food waste, we still have to physically, have access to that food waste. We still have to physically do our extraction and have a plant that handles that. So for us, there's not really a shift when it comes to that. What I have seen is a shift or more of a willing globalness for all businesses to come together to try to help solve this problem. It's fantastic to see it because it is a global problem. It's not a problem that's unique to one country. So from my perspective, the way I've seen the shift is really more in the fact that I see kind of a community that's been developing. COP26 is a prime example of that. All the different global initiatives for climate change and removing plastic waste. These countries that are taking the lead, such as Scotland, are great examples of communities that are developing. And so I think in that way, I'm seeing that's where I see the change is a little bit different than maybe the way you described it, which is another, fantastic idea. But for us, I think it's really more about seeing partnerships, communities. I don't see it anymore as being any blurring. I see a lot of blurring of borders with technologies now. We have a lot of discussions with companies all over the world. It never once comes into our mind as a limitation. That someone might be geographically displaced, whether it be the end product or the waste that's extracted or the manufacturer of the product in the interim part of our process. I do think and see that borders are being blurred and people get the message. This is a global problem, plain and simple. So that's the way I really see things changing.
Thank you. And Julia, what about you? What kind of things are you seeing in terms of the way people are trading and buying and consuming?
I think the point about community is really valid. I mean, we're an entirely locally sourced, UK sourced business. We don't really buy anything from overseas, so that's not so relevant. But what we have seen is really interesting in the organic food world and fresh produce. A lot of the farmers that are using regenerative farming practices or organic farming practices are much smaller. Some of them are kind of family farms. They're generally smaller businesses than the ones that are the huge industrial farmers that would supply many of the big supermarkets. And what was noticed by an organisation called Growing Communities, which is based here in London, was that many of these farmers were selling into London to vegetable.
Nope, we've lost Julia. Yep, okay, we've lost Julia. She's just at a freeze there. Martin, what about you? Have you noticed anything particularly in the innovation space when it comes to trading internationally?
For us, we're building our first biorefinery. We're taking local resources, convert them into products that we will sell locally. As we get bigger, we'll probably need to trade internationally, but that's why we also have this exporting our technology philosophy and go, mountain and Mahama kind of a thing where the resources are, we will build there. But I think it's too simplistic to think that we saw this during COVID, right? When movement stopped, we are interdependent. There are certain resources in certain parts of the world that people need everywhere, and only some countries have them or have the capability to produce them for global dispersion. So I think we will always be somewhat interdependent on each other. I mean, steel at the moment is almost impossible to come by for various reasons because it's all coming out of China. And I think there will be a more sustainable way of fairer trade across the world, but I don't think any one small country is going to become completely independent of anybody else and have all of its own indigenous industries to support everything it needs to do. I mean, that's either utopian or folly. I think international global trade is not going away.
No, indeed. And I think that's what we're wanting to sort of have a look at and have a nod to. It is going to change, and what might that look like? And then how do businesses innovate in order to get ahead of the curve in that? Because it will absolutely, definitely shift. Now, in terms of if you're going to talk about innovation in process terms, could you just tell us a little bit more, Craig, on the CuanTec world in terms of how you're actually using waste? And you have outlined it a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit more about what does it mean from the longestine shells to the plastic? How does that happen? And what did you have to do to create that innovation process?
Sure. Well, obviously one of our goals, like I said at the outset, was to have a plastic replacement to remove single-use plastics in the environment. But for us, the biggest challenge was the source of that. We had an opportunity. One of our co-founders saw an opportunity with chitin. Chitin is the second most abundant biopolymer in the world. It's in anything that has an exoskeleton. As far as that's why crustaceans, shellfish. It exists in insects that have an exoskeleton, and it exists in fungi, which have their structure based on an exoskeleton, such as mushrooms. So what we do is we have developed a process that kind of builds on other processes. But when the company was founded, we looked at how to. It wasn't founded initially with the idea of doing all of this. It just all came together, actually. But the initial process was, how do we improve upon the extraction of chitin itself? Because there were a lot of impurities in the process. When the extraction was happening, there were still impurities that were still there, and that inhibited any use of that chitin. And then some of the other processes were actually quite toxic. So they use chemicals, they use an extreme amount of electricity. The byproduct is quite toxic, and so that byproduct is a waste stream that has to be dealt with, right? And those kind of toxic waste streams, as we know, are things that don't go away easily. So we developed a biological process that improved upon other methods and combined these methods together to give us a completely pure, very unique, very stable chitin that maintains all of its natural biopolymer properties. That's important because we're able to do things with our chitin that using other processes have not been able to do, such as developing our packaging. There's lots of other applications as well out there, but if you look at trying to use those chitin extraction methods and try to develop some of the technologies that we have for the end products, the commercial use products, they can't be done using the same methods that we use to produce the product. Those methods don't have an amenable output to it. Ours does. So, we take the langoustine as a good example because you have fishermen that are out there and they harvest it, and you think about how much of that is used. It's not a whole lot, right? Now that is pulled. The rest of that goes into waste. That's another waste stream that is handled in one of two ways. It's either incinerated, which adds to the carbon footprint, which we know is a tremendous problem and leads towards the global warming problem that we have, or it's put in landfill, which is a space and time requirement. Sure, that'll break down naturally over time, but those are two ways in which it's handled. Most of the time, it's handled through incineration, however. So you have a tremendous amount of waste that happens, and here's an opportunity to take that and now utilize that, put it through our process, and we're able to extract the chitin from that. The byproduct that comes out the other side isn't toxic anymore. It doesn't have all these chemicals that are in it. That byproduct can then be used with partners who might want to valorize that waste stream or that the byproduct that comes out of that. We take that source chitin and we then put that as our raw ingredient. If you look at, as Martin was talking about, the origin of plastics, and he's right. They really started coming about right after World War II. Although they existed prior to that, the mass use of them really started happening after that time. Now, if you want to develop a piece of plastic packaging, it's pretty easy. Those materials are available everywhere. The raw material is there. We had to develop the raw material source in order for us to have our end products. So for us, it's a multi-pronged approach that utilizes, thankfully to our, I wasn't making that as a pun, but
I like what you did there. I'll go
put that in my deck for my next talk. But so that's kind of it was an idea that we had. It was really based on a really basic idea that once we had this chitin, now we're like, well, wait a second. There's things we can do with this that we couldn't do before with other methods, of extraction. So.
Oh, thank you for that. Now we've got a question from the floor. It's we have mentioned it in another panel before. It's the Scottish Exhibition Campus, which is indeed where COP will be hosted later this year. You will all be more than well aware of COP. We will talk about that a little bit towards the end of the panel, if we may. But Matt Brown here is really interested to understand your thoughts on scalability. So, you have hinted at that, Martin. There's certain things that can be done. But how do you scale it actually, and how do all businesses scale the proposition, but also how do sectors, supply chain scale the proposition, and actually how does circular economy get scaled on a global level? And he's actually asking, how likely is it?
Yeah, it's a fair enough point, really. scalability comes down to resources, and that's a fairly broad word. So it's, in our case, it's raw materials, and there's an abundance. We're going to use less than 2% of what's available in the country from the malt whisky industry alone, and we've got a pretty big factory that we're building. We could put several of those across the country. So existence of the raw materials, and we're not restricted to distillery residues. We can use a whole lot of other different things. And there's plenty of resource raw material out there. But the other key resource to all this is people. And that's where I think the concept of a just transition becomes fairly important, because you can't just take away the jobs that currently exist from people who are products of the petrochemical world. You need to be able to replace them. We can't have empty coal towns anymore. That just can't happen anymore. We talk about targets for 2050 and the world will be a better place. For some people, 2050 is 10 to 9 that evening. Is the world a better place for me at 10 to 9? Have I done enough to stay alive? 2050 as a decade is just not a target. You need to be able to bring people with you. And I think human resource will be as critical as anything else. But if we are moving away from those kind of less sustainable jobs into a more circular economy, then retraining, repurposing, doing whatever we need to do to add that level of resource to the innovation, I think will be critical.
Super. And that links really beautifully into some of what we touched on in our first panel today, which was admittedly aimed about young people, but actually the concept and the thinking behind that is very similar in terms of how do you bring that upskilling and reskilling into the room to work with and actually also facilitate some of the innovation as well, rather than just embracing the delivery of the innovation. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Would you like to comment anything on the scalability point, Craig?
Sure. And to Martin's point, it's very similar to ours. With our raw source material, our first products are only going to use a very, very small percentage of all the material that's available out there. Because there is so much material available, it's something easy for us to put small extraction facilities globally and geographically placed. So it would make sense, if you think about it, that you would have small extraction plants that are geographically located centrally to fishing communities, where several fisheries could then feed their waste stream right into one of our extraction facilities. This solves a major problem for the fisheries themselves. Currently, for instance, if you look at a couple of UK fisheries that we talked to, they're not massively large when you think about some of the fisheries that are out there globally, but they spend between 50,000 and 100,000 pounds a year to also remove that waste. So they process their material, and then they have to then pay for that waste to be removed. If they could bring it to us and we were able to process that instead using one of our centrally located facilities, we then convert that into the raw material. That raw material then can be sent to any one of our manufacturing partners and then utilized in the process of manufacturing that. You would definitely envision you would have manufacturing facilities globally located. You wouldn't have just one facility that's massive and producing plastics all over the world, or plastic replacements all over the world. You would want geographically located so that they're within the boundaries of each country. So our model is absolutely geared towards scalability and very amenable to geographically located facilities that are within individual borders. So that's really our approach to it, and it helps everyone from the fishery all the way up to the contract manufacturer and their source materials.
No, that's really helpful, and actually just to can visualize that in terms of the kind of change from the one big dominant site to multiple, and ideally, obviously, those construction sites would be built with circular principles and actually have that kind of modular endeavor as well. So again, you could have some of the linkages of again the last panel, some of the businesses that are working to create really brilliant innovative solutions in the construction industry. So that's really helpful.
No, and that's exactly what the idea is, right? That's exactly the approach for us, is that all of that waste would be utilized, and so that other byproduct would be sent off to our partners as well.
Great. I just want to give a nod to Julia. I'm really feeling for her because she's struggling with her tech logging in, and we've not been able to get her back again. But if she does come back in the room, we will, of course, bring her in the last few minutes of this session here. Now, if we just take one look ahead, we have briefly mentioned COP, and given that we are talking about the circular economy, first of all, I would ask, how do you think the circular economy is going to be embraced in COP? And if indeed you know or have any comment on that, how do you think the proposition can be embraced perhaps more vigorously as part of the endeavour to get to net zero? I'll come to Martin with first.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. How do I think it'll happen, or how do I hope it would happen?
We'll
Like
go
it
for
be very
hope. We'll
difficult.
go for hope. We'll go for hope.
I hope that this COP is the one where they steered away from justifying why they're having the bloody thing and actually turn it around to doing something about it. Enable innovation. Actually show a roadmap. Say this is how we're going to support. We can innovate a way out of this. There are lots and lots and lots of things we can do. As I said, industrial revolution wasn't all that long ago relative to how long we've been on the planet, and we've only become so dependent on oil and fossil fuels, which was kind of the stimulus for all this carbon emissions in less than 100 years. Right? So we can definitely reverse that. And the minds are out there, the innovation is there. You need to support it, you need to enable it. That's financially, that's in terms of, not even necessarily government incentives in terms of cash, but incentivation that this market will remain stable. So you go off making a product and then it's suddenly banned 10 seconds later and you've invested all your money. There must be stability and resources put behind this. But my hope would be that this is a COP where everybody starts talking about how and stops talking about why. My fear is that it'll be a bunch of new targets, more ambitious targets, and absolutely no plan behind how they're going to get there. That would be the fear. But I live in hope, I wouldn't have a business if I didn't live in hope.
Indeed. And what about you, Craig? What's your perspective on that?
I would agree with Martin 100%. I have that same hope as well. And I wouldn't have a business if we didn't have that hope. But I do hope that they do start seeing some real opportunities here. It's great to see cities like Glasgow taking the initiative to eliminate single-use plastics and to mandate these things. If we can start showing at the local level, the local municipalities or at the government level that it can be done, then maybe the rest of the world will sign up. It's not easy to be first when it comes to these things, but it is really necessary in order for the circular economy to have root and to stay. And as Martin said, that it doesn't go away. That we have government supports globally, because for instance, in our field, some of the products that are being developed are going to be more expensive than plastics. Plastics are a commoditized product; they're super cheap. But in order for us to compete, we are going to need government support, and that would be in initiatives such as what Glasgow has done, and which is looking to eliminate single-use plastics. Once you make it illegal, and they have to look at other source materials, well, then that's your way of price supporting without having to have governments providing that financial assistance to do so. Now, Scotland's very unique because we have a lot of financial support out there from the government, and a lot, true belief in really reinventing the economy globally with the circular approach. I think all of these things can shine as an example. It's fantastic that COP is hosted in Glasgow, because that is a city that has all these things that I've just mentioned that they put in place. And I really hope that the example that they've led will catch on. Using, back to Martin's word, using hope. But we'll see.
But Craig, can I
Okay.
just ask you a question? Do you
Sure.
not think that there's more of an appetite now, especially, hopefully I can start saying the expression post-COVID. We're nearly post-COVID. But do you not think there's more of an appetite that people might pay a little bit more for things because they've reevaluated sustainability, they've reevaluated their own lives and lifestyle, and okay, maybe I don't have to travel 2 hours to work every day. You can do things a little bit differently. Maybe there might be more of a social appetite to embrace these things rather than the government enforcing it and having to subsidize things.
No, I absolutely agree. There is more of a social appetite. We've seen that from different research that I've seen. I definitely hear that and get that feedback. But you have to be careful. There are products that can absorb an additional price hit, but they're usually from products that have a higher end margin, right? So, for instance, high end seafood is a very good example. If we use our packaging to wrap seafood, usually that's a higher end product. So the customer can then they usually have they're a little bit more affluent. They have a little bit more purchasing power, so they can make a conscious decision. If you want a long-term solution, though, you have to have this globally, because with the global supports to eliminate that decision now, so that it's also something that it goes into the low-end products, right? We've talked to one very major international company who says, we love the idea, we absolutely want to be there, but our entire price model is based on a lower end price and low margin, and they are just not going to be able to use our products. Other companies, such as we have a partnership with Waitrose, their customers absolutely can make that conscious decision. That is absolutely part of the reason why they see it as a good fit. So there's definitely the ability to have it, but right now I don't see. So I think there's traction there, Martin, to answer your question, and definitely the opportunity for that to happen. But we definitely need to realize that there's going to be a long term before you can get that into every product. I think on the products that you can put it into, such as, you know, if it's seafood, any higher end product that can absorb it, you know, those kind of things, and where people can make a decision. But those are going to come from more affluent products with higher margins for more affluent purchasers.
Thank you for that. So last couple of questions then before we're out. One question is coming in from the audience from William Thompson of Gallus Events. And he's wanting to kind of make a point around how do we make reusing cool and the norm, and how do we remove the old stigma of new is always better, although to some extent reusing old stuff is new in some ways in its own way. But he's asking what role do communication and marketing professionals play on this journey, and I'd be really interested to hear both of your perspectives on that. Martin, I'll come to you first.
It's huge. I mean, everything is a product, really. Everything about our lives is product. It's marketing, it's branding. It sort of creates excitement for people, and it's not just our daily needs. It's, you know, our desires. We like stuff, you know. Might have wanted to see Scotland winning yesterday, and it can change your mood, and they don't, you know. So the world is based on things that are pretty much sold to us. So branding is everything, and expectation, and you know, just we are who we are. We haven't changed completely because we've had a global pandemic. Human beings we like things, and they're sold to us, and that makes us think we like them. So there's no reason why that exact same philosophy can't be put behind things to make you feel good, because the branding has told you and the marketing has told you you're going to feel better if you can do X, Y, and Z. And if in the process X, Y, and Z happen to be really, really good things to do, I have no issue with that. You know, we are amenable kind of creatures on this planet who like to feel good about ourselves, and the proper campaigns. I think the issues I said early on about a lot of the cop stuff it's been demonizing. These are all the wrong things. Look at the bad guys. See how horrible that is. Rather than going around and focusing attention on the people who are trying to do the right things, and doing the right thing is the right thing. You know, that we can reuse things. Maybe you don't need to throw things out as quickly as you did. A lot of people looked at their houses and their homes and did renovation during lockdown. How much of them actually reuse stuff? You know, there was a lot of that going on. And I think there's it's not even huge, it's a critical role of how the message is told to everybody. And it needs to move away from this demonization and stop doing things, go back to the Stone Age and go and live in a cave. No, live your normal life, but do things differently. And communication is absolutely critical in that. Whether you like it or not, we are kind of subject to what other people tell us is good and bad about ourselves. And it's just human nature. So let's use it for good this time.
Love it. That's beautifully put. Craig, what would you like to add to that then for the marketing and communications people out there?
No, I agree. Branding is key on that. Creating a message where really everyone understands, you know, what your focus is. I agree. These materials aren't going away. We all like things. We like stuff. We use things. Plastics are going to be around for a while. Other materials, there's a lot of other pollutants out there besides plastic, right? But, you know, making a message that you understand when you're a consumer, that if you're looking at one shoe, for instance, versus the other shoe, and this shoe uses reused tires. It's just an example. And I see this one, you know, I don't know where they get their rubber or how they produce their shoe. I'm going to probably choose the one that has the, you know, that's doing the reuse approach. I think that goes for a lot of products. And I'm seeing a lot of opportunities out there in products that are doing a reuse approach. And when they market that, you know, if you don't market it, you don't know about it. So then there's no differentiation. The key for any company is to differentiate your product. And in order to do so, you need to have good branding. And if the differentiating factor is the reuse, well, that's something you should absolutely highlight and make known, because then the consumer can make that decision. And I absolutely think, and you know, back to Martin's question earlier too, that absolutely everyone would like to see, you know, the opportunity to make a financial or make a purchasing decision that rewards a company who has invested in the reuse approach or invested in the sustainability approach, rather than rewarding a company who does not. You know, if you have all things being considered equal, the opportunity to purchase one product versus the other, I think almost entirely most people will purchase the product that has been presented as sustainable, circular, or reusable, from recycled materials, unquestionably. And that only comes from having a good message, and however you do that as a company to differentiate yourself.
Super. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. So just to wrap us up then, I wonder if you would just mind sharing a couple of top line headline comments on your circular economy journey, what's really worked for you and why, and what hasn't worked for you and why, because I think that's the kind of intelligence that would be really helpful for our audience here today. Martin, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, our circular economy journey, like, there's an old expression that the pioneers take the arrows and the settlers take the land. So you'll probably relate to that, Craig.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so if you are an innovator, if I'm talking specifically to people who are trying to do something different, persistence, no can't be in the vocabulary. You just, whatever people tell you, you're still right. You can do it. It will work. Bloody mindedness might be another way of looking at it, but I like to refer to it as a healthy disregard for the impossible. And anyone live with that healthy disregard for the impossible, and good luck to you. That's what I would say.
Nice. Yeah, I have, again, a great deal of empathy for that general appetite and attitude, because even within our own journey of 5 years in the circular economy is trying to motivate and inspire, continuing to keep going, because you just know that intuitively it is the right thing to do, as you say, and you've said that before, doing the right thing is the right thing. So thank you for that. And what about you, Craig?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Martin on those statements and those sentiments. It is definitely difficult to be an innovator and a leader. You do get a lot of attention, but people don't understand the sleepless nights that go behind it. I think one of the key things for businesses that are trying to get into this is to understand that you want to have the vision and the mission to get to the full circular approach, but it's okay to do it in staged, in staged way, that you don't take everything on at first. If you try to make the entire picture sustainable right at the outset, you might set yourself up for failure. Focus on the things you can do and you can do well. Partner with things that you might be able to partner with other companies who can help you on the other bits that you will need. And then focus, don't look at too many different materials, for instance. Don't try too many different things. Just focus on the couple things. Get a product out there so that you can then be sustainable yourself. Because if you can't keep your doors open, your sustainable model, which goes to your own business, needs to be sustainable and producing a product, and then you can't move on to the other things. So don't bite off too much at first. And sometimes good enough is good enough for now to get there, knowing that you have this entire vision that's going to happen. But right now we're going to meet these 4 parts of the arrow. If there's a bunch of arrows around here, we're going to get this and this here. We're going to partner with this company here to help us with this. We'll get to this eventually. Just understand and that it doesn't have to be 100% there now. Not a lot of people are doing any of it. So the more you're doing is already a step ahead in the right direction. Focus on that and try not to take on too much.
There's another good saying on that one. Don't let the good be the enemy of the perfect.
Yes, and we touched on that actually in our panel. It's just earlier on, and something that we've had very much as part of our motto, if you like. Semicircular is just great, as part of a circular economy journey. So thank you very much indeed for all of that. And as I say, I really do feel for Julia. She has not been able to reconnect with us, but many thanks to Julia as well. And thank you to Martin and to Craig for some brilliant content. They're really brilliant. And just in terms of top line references, I think some of the messages around stop demonizing, add synergy where we can, I think is brilliant. I think looking much more through the lens of, what's rather than looking at it as a what can I stop, it's how can I do things differently and what can I displace as a business, and how can we make things differently, as well as using sustainable materials perhaps in our endeavours to make things. What's wasted generally, and where can I do something clever with that waste material and add value in the journey. Looking at the partnerships, collaboration, as we know, is very key to do that. You don't need to take the whole circular system on at one time, I think was one of the points that Craig was making. You can break it down and do a bit at a time. Simplicity of story, I think, was one of Martin's points. And then from a COP point of view, I think a brilliant message to conclude this panel is, we can innovate our way out of this. We're innovating our way already through the pandemic. We're innovating our way as part of the economic recovery from the pandemic. The circular economy is absolutely key in terms of innovating our way out of both the pandemic and the climate crisis. So get us a roadmap. We need a roadmap. And I think that's a really good policy ask for us to consider pursuing. And the fact that storytelling is absolutely key. And I think this is the correct expression that you used, Martin, which is pioneers take the arrow and circulars take the land. Like that a lot. That's good. Definitely we'll be using that. So I'd just like to say thank you very, very much indeed to all three of our panellists this morning. Again, it's such a shame that Julia wasn't able to join us for any longer, but I'm sure we'll be able to connect with her again in due course. And I would like to wish you all the best for a fantastic day.